Welcome, everybody. I am Anna Castle, Director of Marketing for Advisicon, and really happy you could join us today. I want to take a brief moment to tell you just a little bit about Advisicon. We're a gold project partner with Microsoft and have been in the project and portfolio space for over 20 years with a lot of experience covering a wide variety of industries. Let me move to the next slide here. We are passionate about streamlining your project with a blend of methodology and tools. We are here for you and position ourselves as your project management one-stop shop. That means that we have specialized departments focused on consulting, training, building tools, and even writing books, as we understand that sometimes you need a combination of tools and people to accomplish the project results you are after. Just a quick note about today's session. We are wanting it to be interactive. This is your time. If we cover something that makes sense or you need clarification, please feel free to utilize the question section in the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. We're going to do our best to address those during our time together today. If we're not able to, we'll be sure to follow up. As you can see today, it's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Advisocon's president and founder and Microsoft MVP for the 14th year running, Mr. Tim Runcie.
Thank you, Anna. Let me turn on my video for those of you that are actually here during the live broadcast. So that should pop up on the screen here. Welcome, and I'm excited to have everyone attending. This is a great session. In fact, we've had a lot of requests around project and kind of what we call tips of the trade, or what are the things that make you really effective in using this tool to manage projects to portfolios to resource demand and capacity forecasting. So as Anna mentioned, I've been renominated as an MVP. That is an annual competition where you really have to service and take care of your community of practice. So I'm happy to continue to lean on Microsoft to help them build better tools and make things work better for you. And there are exciting new elements that are emerging into this whole Office 365 world. But today, let's just kind of go through our presentation and drill into some of our agenda. So one of the things I like starting off with is how to avoid pitfalls. So as a lot of organizations use project, they may not use it very effectively, and I use a little phraseology that says if you're spending more than 30 minutes once a week managing your schedules, you're spending too much time. And what that means is not the invention of a schedule or figuring out all the requirements and building out all your estimates. It's really about when you go in and you start using this tool, a dynamic schedule should let you get in, get out, and get back to work. So there's some key pitfalls that we're going to kind of help you understand how to avoid. We're also going to talk about the interface. I think that's very important for you to be able to maximize what you're doing. And imagine sitting in a car and you're not familiar with where the gear shifter is, or paddle shifters now if you've got some of the newer, fancier cars, and is my windshield wipers on the left or are they at the right, where are my high beams and low beams? And so being comfortable with your interface is going to be something very important for you to work with. And then I'm going to drill into tips and tricks and just how to manage projects. I think really the meat and potatoes will be demoing live in the tool. I think that'll be helpful for you guys to understand. And then I like to step back and talk about what you're not going to find in a book. I've authored 36 books on project management, methodologies, and technologies, and so in many cases, many of my colleagues are out there who have also written books, and we talk about what we really don't find in a book that will help you feel like you've got it, or at least you're on top of that. So I will take questions, and so as Anna mentioned, please do use the question section on the side panel. We'll kind of pause, take some questions as we go through, and then we'll wrap up with summaries. So I'm excited to kind of walk you guys through this today. So again, tips and tricks of the trade, making Microsoft Project work for you. So let's drill in on what I call understanding key pitfalls. And by understanding key pitfalls are really things that are big and you want to avoid them, as well as potentially things that will really just make your life harder, maybe not a showstopper, but make it much harder as you begin managing a large schedule. So let me bring up Microsoft Project. And today I'm going to try and avoid doing a whole lot of typing, but I'm going to kind of flip back and forth between a new schedule and an existing schedule. But we'll talk about how you can make it look, good, how you can get in, manage, lots of rows, manage lots of resources, and make this kind of spin on a dime. So let's watch a couple of the pieces that we have getting in here. So if we look at leading to a place where you have timeline views and you have rows and columns of data, and you can see deadlines and resources. This really is kind of a build-up to working in a relational database. So let's take a look at starting with a blank schedule. So we don't always get to start with great templates. By the way, I encourage people to email us directly. In many cases, we have templates, so we've moved some of these up into the Microsoft Cloud for people to download. People ask us for Agile components, so these are all things that we are happy to help speed your process along. But let's get into kind of really understanding what we call the building story of a schedule. So there's two dimensions. One is if I come in and I begin creating a schedule. So if I'm going to just say, hey, this is my planning phase, and I hit enter, notice for those of you that are new to project or maybe haven't worked in more of the current versions, is that we've got this duration, start, and finish that appear to be empty. And if I come in here, one of the things that the engineering team at Microsoft recognized is that project is a relational database, but most people think in terms of a spreadsheet. They really like, using a spreadsheet that says, hey, I can type and put anything that I want in any area. So if I put in planning phase and then I go through requirements mapping, notice it doesn't say anything about, a default start, finish, or any of that. So if I come over here and I'm beginning to build, understanding how project's going to think and how you can optimize that is important. So if I say planning phase, how long is that going to take in terms of an estimate? Well, if I type in, I don't know, and I hit enter, notice it'll take that. And the reason for this is that we are in this manual versus an auto schedule mode. Let me zoom that for you guys here. So by the way, this is a product called Zoom It, and it's free from Microsoft. It allows you to just go down and zoom in and kind of showcase pieces. So a great little product. We use it all the time for training. And so we're in a manual mode that says, hey, listen, at this point in time, we don't know. I don't have to use a default entry. Now again, remember that we are in a relational database, and one of the things about relational databases is that date fields, number fields really are designed to be hard-coded to protect those dates and times. So if I come over to the start date and say, well, listen, when's that going to start? And I type in TBD, and you hit enter, what? A date field taking text? Look at that. So what's happening here is that Microsoft said, let's step back and make this a little kinder and gentler. And believe it or not, behind the scenes, it's monitoring whether it's going to allow text or dates, numbers to go into different fields. And it actually has a duplicate set of fields to help you evolve your schedule. So for example, if I come out here and say, hey, it's going to be a 7-day duration, perhaps, that we're going to move through there. Notice I don't have a start or finish, but I am starting to see the relational time phase data here on the left-hand side, meaning that project's starting to say, look, I can put hours, numbers, and cost in place, even though at a presentation layer, I may not fully understand exactly when that will start, but I can actually begin building that. So if I come in here and I clear that out by pressing the delete key, or if I come back in and just say, hey, listen, I want to make that an auto-schedule task, you'll notice that it certainly puts the information in. But if I came in with an auto-scheduled and I typed in TBD and hit enter, it just sends you this little error message that says the date you hasn't supported. So understand that as you're evolving a schedule, a great place to start is in what we call manual to automatic mode. And the idea of a manually scheduled task is that if I come down here to requirements gathering, and maybe that's going to be 5 days, and we'll go through here. Well, as a lot of you know that if you don't have a start or finish date, notice these are hard. We actually have filled them in where these are kind of soft. It's fuzzy. It doesn't quite know what they are. But if you begin to create relationships between your tasks, and again, the idea of a database is you establish dependencies, you'll notice that project will begin to evolve that schedule for you. Filled out the predecessor, gave you a start and finish date. And the value in terms of helping to kind of start with data coming from anywhere is that people can build this in Word, they can build it in PowerPoint, they can build it in Excel. They can copy and paste and put data in here, and project won't basically fight you in terms of how you build that schedule. At some point, we do want to true up this information, and that's where you may want to move from manual to auto-scheduled. But inherently, the idea is that it's a kinder, gentler approach to getting you in and out. Well, for some of us old-time project users, in many cases, we're like, no, go, go, go. So in many cases, a lot of people are saying, hey, listen, as I build my schedule, I like to see the column, whether it is in a task mode. And you'll see this little symbol here that says auto or basically automatic. And so in this manual option, or manual to auto scheduling, is a good visual cue. Well, if you're passing a schedule between several people, the default in the bottom of your screen, way down here, is new tasks are manually entered. And again, that's the default in project. You can come down here and click on this and change that, but do understand that if you change that and say, well, I want auto scheduled, it's not for the existing task, it's for the current task. So if I type in new task, it will come in this auto schedule mode. And so what people will say, well, I'm working in my schedule, but things just aren't updating. Well, chances are there may be a little bit of a mixture of both the manual or auto scheduling. And so if you have 10,000 rows and you want to set them to all dynamic or auto schedule, just highlight the column, click on that, you'll notice that that'll move directly into that schedule. And the idea is that as I make changes, that schedule will ebb and flow. Now let's talk about ebbing and flowing, because this is the second part. We talk about understanding key pitfalls or things that you may need to kind of grow or mature out of. Is that in project, when you're in manual mode, the second most common complaint is that stuff moves around on the project managers, right? It moves around and they don't know why. I add or take away resources and stuff moves. So what the product team did is said, look, we'll let you treat it like a spreadsheet. It's a relational database. We'll start holding and evolving that information. But for example, if the planning duration goes from 7 days to 3 days, and I hit enter, notice row number 2 did not move, right? The idea is that this whole dynamic scheduling is turned off. But at the same time, nothing's moving without the project manager knowing. And so at this point in time, you can come in, take a look at it, and say, yep, that makes sense. Or maybe it goes to 10 days. Let me just change that number. And you're going to see where project will actually start prompting the end user with visuals to say, hey, listen, by the way, if this was a dynamic schedule, most likely that needs to change. And so you're going to get this, looks like a spell check here, but if you right-click on this, you can tell it to respect its links. And if you go up to the ribbon, which we'll talk about here in a minute, respecting links is very important. So the idea is that you can have a manual schedule updated, you can take a separate vendor's spreadsheet of data, or copy and paste a high-level schedule into a detailed schedule. The idea is that if there's changes, you see what they are, and you can tell it to respect its links, and you'll see it moved. Shorten the duration again, kind of in a planning mode. It doesn't change without the end user having that. Again, I can certainly right-click, respect my links, and it updates. You can do that for 1 or 10,000 rows at the same time. So some pitfalls to just kind of avoid is be aware whether you're in auto schedule or manual mode, and tasks that are in manual mode will not dynamically update. Easy to change though. Change that to auto schedule, and certainly as I change this to 10 days, we see the value of work activities moving. So again, from a relational database perspective, I have people say, well, you know, I prefer using spreadsheets. In fact, I hear executives tell me, I like to use a spreadsheet. I like the spreadsheet approach. And I'm thinking, well, we can give you the spreadsheet feel by giving you a relational database that has an interface to do that. And Project 2010 versions or higher are going to have this for you and available. Now this is just the beginning. So we talk about manual versus automatic in terms of things that automatically or dynamically will move. The other is as you begin building your schedule, and this is important, is that in many cases people will come in and they say, well, you know, requirements mapping really does need to move forward in time. It's not going to start on the 14th. In fact, it's going to start on the 19th. And what they'll do is they'll click on the start or finish date. And so the first most common mistake that people make is that they'll actually start hard coding their dates. And watch this. If you've ever seen this planning wizard come up telling you you have to move or perhaps break the link, the idea is that what it's saying is maybe there's a better way to do this. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep the link. I'm going to move it forward and click on OK. And look, it picked up, it moved to the 19th, all looks good. Problem is that if there really is a dependency between planning phase and requirement submission, is what I've done is I've added this symbol here on the left-hand side. And what that means is I've created a constraint. And so if you're touching start or finish dates, you really are ending up hard coding your project schedule. Now let me just show you the long way to remove this, and then I'll show you a short way or a faster way to get rid of that. But if you double click on a task, you can go in and say, hey, let's do this as soon as possible. And of course, it moves that back. Now, the idea is that maybe I don't want to hard-code my dates. And the idea of hard-coded dates is that if things are hard-coded, they don't move. And the kiss of death to a dynamic schedule is a hard-coded schedule, meaning that if you've got constraints in there, it will not ebb and flow easily. So we want to look at how to avoid that and perhaps maybe put some things that might help you manage that schedule a little bit better. So as we look at accidentally setting a constraint, another common activity that comes up is that as people are working with their tasks, and so let me put this at 7 days, and I'll do requirements mapping at 5 days. A lot of times they'll go over here and say, well, let me just drag that and we'll move it over to Monday. And they'll pick it up and drop it off, and you can see very nicely it just moved the whole thing. However, what did it do? It set a constraint. And so the idea is that if there is a relationship dependency, we really want to establish some of those by doing that directly. And so here's a couple ideas I think that may save you some time. So again, instead of double-clicking on this and drilling in and setting it to as soon as possible, try this. Click on your start date. Press the delete key, and what this will do is it will remove the constraint from the task. Now, if you do have dependencies, you certainly can say the predecessor of task number 1 is really, or task number 2 is really row number 1. And so we could type a 1 in there. We could, let me undo that. We could put our mouse pointer in the middle of the bar and pull that straight down and just touch the task. But the idea is that if for some reason we have a dependency and the planning phase actually takes less time, instead of running through your whole spreadsheet and updating all the dates that change, project will have that automatic refresh, meaning that that dynamic schedule will help you move that. Now again, these are basic elements, but you will be surprised at how many project managers come in and go, oh, you know, that's got a hard-coded date, it won't move. Now, again, let's think about our planning phase might take 4 days, and I still need my requirements mapping to happen on the 19th. And so we have several options. One, of course, is that I can take a task and double-click on the link line that leads between those, or I can actually drill into it and go into what's called Predecessors and Successors, or I literally could come over to my Predecessors column and type that in here, but I'm able to choose the types of linked relationships. Hey, these start at the same time. Notice no constraint on the left, and it actually will ebb and flow, meaning that the start of task number 1 will trigger the start of task number 2. If I'm growing these activities, you'll see that, hey, the start didn't change, the finish did, but there's no dependency between those two. If I go and I change that to a finish to finish, meaning that they should be finishing roughly about the same time, or the finish of task 1 drives the finish of task number 2, then we have a good opportunity to manage that and manage it directly. Now, we all know that things don't always start and finish exactly at the same time, so let me give you a couple shortcuts. And again, these are tricks of the trade. If you go to an activity or a link between tasks, if I double-click on this link line and I go to task dependencies, you can see here that we have this predecessor column, and I'll just kind of circle the pieces or put a square box around those, and we can choose the type of relationship, but this lag option allows you to come in very quickly and efficiently and say, you know what, these are going to start at the same time, but you know what, about 2 days into planning, then I can start doing requirements mapping. So let's do that. Let me go ahead and click on OK, and you notice that they do have a start to start, but I put a little bit of lag there. And the beautiful thing about this is that there is no constraints. Again, your schedule kind of ebb and flow based upon the buffer that you need to create. Now, I have a lot of organizations that work in Agile, or they're working in, maybe it's a healthcare planning project, and what they're saying is, you know, in estimating, especially when you're building a schedule, sometimes you really just don't know exactly the number of elapsed days or weeks or minutes or hours between the start or finish of something else. So here's a trick that I think that may help you guys. I don't see this in very many places. Again, these are one of those, I don't find it in a book. I know we put it in our books, but people aren't running out to Amazon every day and buying those. So here's a trick for you guys, is that if I do have a relationship between a task that says, hey, listen, the finish of task number 1 will trigger the start of task number 2, and I put a 2-day buffer there, but maybe I don't know that it's a 2-day buffer. Maybe somebody comes back and says, well, no, it's not a positive 2-day. There's really some overlap. And so instead of going and saying, well, make that negative 2 days, and I have a fixed duration, you might say, listen, it's minus 25%. And now what we're saying is really, I'm looking at about 25% before the end, meaning that about 75% into the planning phase, I can start doing requirements mapping. Now here's the great thing about this. that lag time will grow dynamically based upon the duration of the predecessor. What that means is that right now, if you look closely, I've got a 2-day lag. Look at that, Thursday, Friday overlap. But if I step back and change this to 4 days and hit enter, you're going to notice it moves to 1 day. And again, it's that 25% overlap. So if I change the planning phase to 7.87 days, what would be the lag? Well, we don't have to figure it out. Project will figure it out because it's a minus 25% of whatever that predecessor is. So inherently the idea is that you've got this dynamic ebb and flow as you begin creating those relationships between your activities. So again, if I go to 6 days and this is a 4-day initiative, inherently the idea is I get a 25% overlap. So be thinking of how to use your lag, your leads, or your predecessor relationships versus hard coding your dates. And the final part that I'm going to wrap up around just this accidental setting constraints and certainly how to remove constraints is that, if you put a constraint on a task, sometimes there's a good reason for that, right? Something can't ship until a particular date. And most often we just say, hey, we have a key milestone delivery. And that key milestone delivery is a zero duration activity, and it's going to happen after a particular task. So for example, if I take these two tasks together and I'll right click on it and I'll just go ahead and tell it to link. I'll just use my what's called mini bar, and I don't know if you guys have seen that before, but there's a little mini bar that's associated to a project. And we hear this all the time that the Microsoft engineering team heard one of the #1 requests from PMs worldwide is that they'd love to have a mini bar at their desk to help them deal with all the stresses of project. So sure enough, they built this directly in, and here you go. I don't think that's the mini bar that people were asking for, but here it is. You can link your activities together. Problem is that key milestone delivery that needs to be done has a deadline that may be in the future. So what people will come in is they'll come into the constraint type and say, it must finish earlier than, no earlier or no later. Hey, listen, I can't slip beyond a particular date. I need to ensure that that date is, why don't you say Monday the 26th. Cannot miss this date. And when I click on this, a lot of you guys have seen this message come up that says, hey, listen, you've got a constraint in place. And so you read through this and you kind of go, well, first one says no constraint, second one gives me one I didn't ask for, and third is let's continue. I usually tell people, listen, if you know and purposely want to set a constraint after what I show you, which is maybe a better option, then don't let this bother you anymore. Just let it kind of basically put the constraint in place. But I think there's a better way of doing it, and I'll show you that in just a moment. But let's say we hard code that and we put a constraint on the left-hand side of your schedule, row number 3, you can see, oh, hey, there's a constraint there. It's saying, hey, listen, we cannot slip past a certain date. And so downstream, we have our we'll say dev team, building, we have our training team, creating classes based on what we're mapping out, and let's say these guys are 10 days and this is a 20-day initiative, and I tie everybody together and I link them downstream. The idea is that there may be dependencies tied to key milestones, and I know a lot of you guys run into this where there are key deliverables or dependencies. If I shorten these up, we'll just make them smaller so we can see them in the same screen. Watch this. So if for some reason that our tasks are going through and, so for example, somebody says, hey, listen, our key stakeholders are unavailable and I'm going to pull out a key resource and I'm going to split this task. We're just going to stop the work and then we'll pick that up on Wednesday. As you begin moving forward, you'll notice that your milestone getting very dangerously close to our deliverable, but we didn't miss it. Again, I cannot split a task, or maybe 50 rows up above, somebody goes, well, that's not 6 days, that's 8 days. And then the requirements mapping goes from 4 days to 25 days. When you hit enter, you get prompted by this planning wizard. This planning wizard is trying to let you know you have constraints. And again, this is why we avoid trying to set constraints, because sometimes it's not very clear in what that is. So if I say, yeah, no, I need to keep the constraints in place, go ahead and update my schedule. The big question is did we miss our October 26th deadline? And the answer is no, we did not, because project will not let that task hold right there. Won't let it slip. Now, in reality, we did miss the deadline, right? The problem is everyone else who's looking at updates that may be dependent, whether you're using master projects and linking files together, is that they're still seeing that you're on the 26th. So here's a way that I might suggest not setting a constraint. Again, I've gone through this whole constraint model to talk about pitfalls and tips and tricks that may help you manage project better. But watch this. Instead of going in and setting a deadline on the 26th, let me set this to as soon as possible. But you'll notice in the task information dialog box, there's actually a column or a data field called deadline. And I love deadlines because if you really do have a deadline of the 26th, let's put it out there. Let's click on OK, and let's make it visible. I want everyone to see this deadline. You can see it right here in that Gantt chart. There it is. Now, in our organization, I usually yell at people saying, I want our key deadlines not to be a fine green, soft, warm, fuzzy arrow. I want people to go into bar styles and scroll to the bottom of the list of all the options and find that deadline and go, I want people to see it, no missing it. So let's make it a red flaming tower of death. And unfortunately, Microsoft hasn't given us the flaming tower, our own icons, but we can change some of the symbols of what we see here. And now I shouldn't miss my deadline. I can visually see where those are. But watch this. If for some reason we go to 25 days from a planning exercise because something broke or somebody was unable to get it, or the rains in South Carolina flooded out the team and they're stranded at the airport and we have to skip a couple days, if we're going to miss key deliverables, even if you're what we call death by 1,000 duck bites, in terms of little changes that kind of lead to a big missed deadline, we want to know about it. And you can see right here, as I put that in place, is that there's my deadline. I've clearly missed it, but I get these visual alerts and visual cues that tell me that I'm going to miss that deadline. Now remember, you may lose your job if you miss your deadline. That doesn't mean we're going to miss the deadline. The idea of a dynamic schedule is to alert you ahead of time that there are issues coming and you can have time to prepare for it. But if project is prompting you with these constraint messages that aren't very clear, or it's not showing you potentially key dates you're going to miss, the idea is that we want to surface that. So as a project or portfolio or program managers, you can look at the initiatives, identify what the problems are, and put your resources on that critical path. So again, this is just some of those key elements that may help you manage that. And again, the final piece that I would talk about in terms of pitfalls is this. Planning phase is usually a phase, meaning that there's activities that happen underneath it. So if I insert a couple rows here and I say requirements, or I'll just say let's stakeholder mapping, and that's usually part of requirements, and I'll say project charter validation. So we're going to validate the project charter, and we're just in a planning exercise, maybe, and we'll say 3 days and 3 days. Here we go. And I indent these directly underneath them. Again, you can promote or demote. Very common. It's a great idea. Hey, listen, I'd like to see the ability to expand and collapse my detail. But the second most common mistake that happens in project is that there's some great little tips that are in here, but they also sometimes come back and bite people. For example, key milestone delivery. If maybe you're trying to highlight a few activities and you grab and put your mouse pointer over this, if I put it over the first part of a cell, literally the first couple letters right here, you're going to notice that your screen, or basically your mouse pointer, will change to a horizontal arrow. And the idea that in highlighting, people accidentally do this. They accidentally drag to the right, and they can indent. So you can literally indent and outdent your schedule with your mouse. Great news for all you mousers out there is that you can actually promote it or demote it. Problem is I suddenly lost a series of activities that may have not been, like requirements mapping went from a series of days to now a milestone based upon sub-activities. So the idea is I can certainly undo that, but watch or pay attention to accidental promotion or demotion. Just pay attention to that. Very common, I'll see people do that where they're highlighting things and they didn't accidentally realize they promoted these activities underneath an activity. So again, things to watch for. Now you notice that I've clicked on undo a few times, and I think that's helpful, but these initial pieces right here are extremely important in terms of simple building, setting yourself up for success for a dynamic schedule. And I've managed schedules that are 10, 20,000 rows. We've seen joint combined project schedules of over 100,000 lines mapped between different files, and some of these basic principles, kind of like Mr. Miyagi's approach to using Microsoft Project, is wax on, wax off, right? Make sure you don't set constraints. Don't hard code your dates. Leverage your dynamic capabilities of the tool. And whether it's 10 rows or 10,000 rows, the idea is you should get in, get out, and get back to work. Now, let me pause and just see if there's any questions. Then I'm going to drill into some other tips and tricks around speeding up the approach in project. Again, I think you're going to find some things that will help you rapidly use the schedule as well as understanding the interface. So, Anna, let me pop back up here. Any questions before I move on to
Yeah.
supercharging your face?
So speaking of constraints, are there ever a good time to use constraints?
Is there ever a good time to use constraints? Great question. So let's just pop back into project. So the answer is that, you know, in some cases you may need to say, look, there is no dependency. So you can see in this schedule I've got really no constraints down the left-hand side, but if you have activities that clearly have no dependencies, then you will have to drag or set the date. And so the answer is that it's not perfect. But again, if you're in a spreadsheet, imagine you had all these rows and somebody comes and updates that schedule, instead of you going down and making all these date changes in your spreadsheet, you literally can have this come back. If you do have manual tasks or tasks that are actually not, constrained, meaning that you typed a start date, then you'll have to go and update those, and that is totally okay. It just is not very dynamic, and so what we're trying to do is alleviate some of that pain so people can quickly progress the schedule, get in, and get back. Okay, Anna, other questions? I'll hop in and show a couple shortcuts around our interface.
Yep, one more. When or what type of tasks are good to use for manual scheduling?
Oh, that's a good question. So I like manual scheduling, especially when I'm interacting with people who are evolving a schedule. In many cases, we might start with you know, a Kanban board, or we might be doing Post-it notes on a wall, or they've done a spreadsheet. I'm moving data in. But you know, since I'll talk about this, one thing that I find very commonly, and I don't know if you guys have attended any of the trainings that we've done on Agile, but let me open up an Agile schedule real quick, and let's just grab an Agile advanced schedule just shortly. As you can notice that while we could do dynamic tasks, in many cases when there are no dependencies, meaning that I have a sprint or a series of activities that don't have them, manual's perfect. You drag them, you move them around, you don't even think about constraints, but they are time boxed within a sprint, right? They're time boxed within a period of time. So use it very commonly that just says drag it, drop it, move it where it needs to go. I don't even hardly think about it because there are no dependencies. The technical team will timesheet against it. People will progress that. And that's the other part in our project schedule, is that, remember, as you're working, your actuals will override your plan. So the idea is if you're spending infinite time on planning, not a good use, right? Get it close. Horseshoes and hand grenades to produce your estimates to be able to manage from, but then let it unfold. So again, sometimes manual is a great place to just say, look, at this area, it's not worth dragging or digging into the details. So great question, Anna. All right, let me step into a little bit about the interface. I'm going to talk about the ribbon for just a moment, and then we'll talk about some of the defaults. It won't take very long, but I really want to get into also how to manage, or some managing activities in project that are extremely helpful. So think about your interface to project. So if I come back out here and I say, listen, I've got this great new interface. I've got this whole timeline view sitting at the top here. There are things that you can do to manage, and the best place to start with is literally understanding how to use your ribbon. The ribbon has everything on it that you need to do. And remember, it's context sensitive. So what you click on will change what's in that ribbon. For example, if I click in my timeline view here, you'll notice that the ribbon changed, and I've got this new timeline tools. Click in, click out. And so while I'm in this timeline view, I'm not going to find these unless I happen to be there. So the ribbon is designed. It was actually designed because Microsoft Word had way too many things in there, too many menus and toolbar buttons, and Microsoft had to rethink their paradigm for presenting context-sensitive information and not letting people wander through mazes of menus and buttons to find things. It doesn't mean you can't customize it. So let's start with a few things and just talk about how it's organized. So first of all, I usually encourage people to understand that in the 2010, 2013, 2016, by the way, is out. So in versions that are coming, you're going to have these ribbons that are designed to be organized by functional area. And Microsoft, when they first built their ribbon, didn't do it when Office did. So in 2007, when Word and Excel and PowerPoint and all got their ribbon, Project did not. And the reason for that is they did something very special, but behind the scenes, they had time to watch how people reacted to the ribbon. And so what they did is they organized this ribbon into what we call functional areas. So if you think about diagramming a sentence where you talk about adjectives, nouns, verbs, going from this menu-driven and toolbar button approach, which was all verb-driven, we've now grouped things in by what I call nouns. So if you want to work with tasks, you click on the Task tab. When you want to work with resources, you click on the Resource tab. If you want to work with business intelligence and dashboards, you click on the Report tab. And if you want to look at views or look at the connectivity of formatting, all of these are grouped by functional areas. We organize these by nouns versus just using verbs. So it becomes much more simpler and easy to work with. Now the ribbon, if I click on the File tab and I go down to Options, is that we can customize this ribbon to tune it to have or add different things. In fact, if you notice on my screen, I have a few extra items turned on. And let me show you what they are. So if I click on the Customize the Ribbon, you're going to notice that we had this thing called the developer or apps or team, and that's because I'm actually connected to Team Foundation server where I can take a high-level schedule and push it into Visual Studio or TFS, let my dev team de-evolve all the things that need to go on, but I can roll that data back up. And so we built a connector, and there's opportunities to synchronize project schedules to other environments so your developers aren't going into project to timesheet. They just update their data, and we pull it back into our schedule. But if you notice here, I've got an option called Tim's Tools. And so if I click on Tim's Tools, I can actually add new tabs, and then I can add custom groups. When we talk about a custom group, if you look here, this is my task tab, right? And then I also have the ability to have a group, and the idea of grouping is lumping like items together. And so inherently, if you want to put things, make your own toolbars, especially from a PMO perspective, if you've got macros or custom reports, great place to do it. Standardize on the ribbon. All your project managers have at their fingertip this Tim's Tools, and you can see right here, Tim's Tools. You can click on it. I've got my own group. It's just that easy to come in, do File, Options, customize the ribbon, and again, add or take away elements that you need to work with. So again, you can see here, here's your native ribbons. You can kind of manage or design these yourself. And again, any one of these I can come in, add a macro or create a function around that, and then I can come in and just rename it or give it a different symbol. So it's a little bit of fun is that you can kind of tailor this the way you need to. It's not just hard-coded to only have certain tabs. And again, understanding that interface is going to be helpful for you. Now, since I happen to be in what we call the backstage, when I go File, Options, right? So File, Options, there's some important things that, again, that I would help recommend from a project management perspective you take advantage of these. Let me show you a few of those. First of all, if you look at my screen here, you'll notice that I am showcasing something called an entry bar. Now, if you're using a new installer project, you're not going to find that entry bar. In fact, by default, it's turned off. And the reason why is there's a timeline and a toolbar, and we actually have the ability to have multiple timelines. And so if you go over to the Display tab, I usually encourage people to say, hey, look, if you want to click on a cell and see what the values are, or have a summary of 15 people and not having to increase your column width to find that, turn your entry bar back on. Some of us old school Microsoft product users definitely are looking for that when you come in. Very, very helpful to take advantage of managing that directly. Next, as we continue through the backstage in what we call options, you come to this schedule section, and later on in some of our other trainings, we'll talk a little bit about the auto schedule or manual schedule default choice here. Again, remember, you could do this in your lower left-hand corner in project, you can just come right down here and set this as you're working in the project itself. However, if you want, you can also define work in hours. You could talk about what are called the fixed units, fixed duration, fixed work, which really gets into our effort-driven scheduling and the way that project thinks as you add and take away resources. So very powerful. The one that I usually have people focus on, there are two key elements here. First, I usually go to save, and I have people turn off the autosave, and here's why. Autosave is designed to kick on every few minutes or after a period of time and save your file. Great, love it. Remember, save early, save often. However, as we're working in project, the beautiful thing is that if you go to your advanced tab in project, you're probably going to find that your setting right here for undo is at 20. And this is a default setting for Microsoft Office. And what that means is that when you have Word and Excel and PowerPoint and Visio, the defaults that come from Office were 20 levels of undo. Now think about that for a moment. If you're in PowerPoint, you're kind of designing, moving things around and changing colors and looking at it and then tuning it a little bit more, and you get to 20 levels of undo, that's not a whole lot. Or in Visio, for sure, when you're doing a lot of process diagram and connecting things and moving them around and nudging them, 20 levels of is not very helpful to be stuck at. Well, remember, in project, 20 levels means that you could be going and saying, hey, I've got a problem. I got a resource that's overallocated. How do I solve it? You add some lag, you shorten some duration, you swap out some people, you pop in, you view your report. You can very easily bypass the ability to undo that back in project. So I encourage people to bump this up to 99 levels of undo. Very helpful. People usually ask me, how come I get 99 and they get 20? And of course, they haven't simply changed it, but I usually tell them that you get one level of undo for every year that you've used Microsoft Project. And then I just say nothing. So been using it a long time, maybe not 99 years, but great. Bump that up, because now you can actually run through and do what-if scenarios, change things. You can run macros and undo your macros. Extremely helpful, very powerful. And back to that save, is if autosave is turned on, you have 99 levels of undo, and you're in the middle of doing this what-if scenario, and autosave kicks on, basically you locks out your ability to undo that. So turn it off, save early, save often, do it manually, but leverage those undo features. Again, from a project perspective, very helpful in working and managing. Okay. Let's step into looking at a couple things in terms of our ability to really manage options. So I'd like to get in and talk about the dynamic capabilities of project. And we started that story as we begin looking at some of the options that we have here. So let me just take these tasks. I'm going to show you a few things that just say, hey, look, in project scheduling, the day in and day out activities of a project manager really fall to some very basic things. In many cases, I have organizations sit down and we talk about how we reduce costs. How do we actually resolve under and over allocation of resources? And then, of course, if we're dealing with how to reduce costs and resolve resource allocations, finally we hear people say, how do we crash or compress the schedule? And what you're going to find is that there are really about 5, maybe 6 things, depending on how deep you're getting into resource management, that you would do that lets you run every real-world scenario through it. Literally 5 to 6 physical steps that you do in project that allow you to manage. And as you pick those up in your day-to-day work activities, it's helpful. So let's take this schedule. We've been kind of playing around a little bit with it. Let me just start it out from scratch here. I don't want to do a lot of typing, so let me break all my links. Stakeholder mapping, a lot of times we'll do that in requirements, so let me just move that whole row. And let's just insert a couple tasks here. So we'll map our stakeholders. We're going to go ahead and get requirements, insert validate requirements. Here we go. And I'll say requirements complete. I like milestones, right? And let's put a couple durations here, or actually I'll just leave them at 1 day for right now. We'll play around with this in a moment. I'm going to highlight those. Remember, I talked about watch out for that indent. You can grab it, you can promote it in. Very helpful, but if it's accidental, it'll break the links if you try and put them back. Again, undo, a great tool. So if I'm in my planning phase, I might want to do cost planning. Let's insert another task here, risk planning, and we'll do resource planning. I told you I wasn't going to make this a typing exercise. And then we'll say planning complete, right? Planning phase complete. Great. All right, now we'll leave the rest here. In fact, let's take out the key dev team training. Let's just leave these two phases in, and let's talk about the process of managing a schedule. Let's look at those 5 or 6 things that come up. So first of all, one of the things that we find in our managing is that we certainly want to establish a timeline. And as you begin looking at the level of effort of work and duration, there's going to be behavior that you have. So if you're doing a planning exercise, you say cost planning is 3, risk planning is going to be 2 days, and resource planning is going to be 5 days. We begin to say, okay, I'm doing an estimate or I'm pulling these together. How do I actually create an evolved, dynamically linked schedule? So the idea, again, is we have those predecessors. And I usually tell people it's the relationships that matter. It's the relationships that allow you to create the dependencies to allow that schedule to dynamically update. So if we are first going to start with our cost planning and do resource planning, and sometimes we do a work breakdown structure that's kind of organizing the activities. You may even want to organize by highlighting the entire row and dragging and moving things in the order that you want to see them. Again, I like to see a time phase progression of work activities. So again, I can go here to row number 3 and say, well, what's the predecessor? Well, first we're going to do cost planning. If I type a 2, you can see it creates a dependency. But maybe I have 3 people in part of my project team, and I don't have to wait till I finish cost planning to start doing resource planning. So in this case, I can double-click on that link line and make it a start to start, but we're going to wait 1 day to get that started. Again, risk planning. Maybe I want to wait till risk is done from both my cost planning and my resource planning to begin to factor out my risks. And so I've created a schedule here where there are 2 dependencies. Again, I put my mouse pointer in the center of the bar, pull straight down, get a little spider web, and you can go and touch and link all the activities that go together. In this case, I've already both linked them. In many cases, if you look at the project and the layout, sometimes the lines overlap. I'll just kind of go into what I call layout by right-clicking in the timeline of the Gantt chart. And some people don't use the Gantt chart at all, but I'll just go into to my layout, and I'll kind of overlap those. It's a little bit easier to see this. So remember, the idea is that if you work in the spreadsheet side of things, don't spend a lot of time looking at the Gantt chart, that's okay. But when it comes to relationships, here's a great way to visualize some of that information. Now, of course, when all these are done, I look at the schedule and I create a dependency between my milestones. So again, whether it's my predecessors or typing or putting them in there, but I'm beginning to evolve those. Now, what's going to happen next is very important. In many cases, people will come through and they'll just highlight their tasks and then come up here and hit the link button. And if you look here, I certainly can go and link task and task activities together. In fact, if I just want to highlight all of these and go, yep, predecessors, successors, let's go ahead and link those together. You can highlight and create some of those dependencies by simply clicking and linking. However, you may want to look and think about this little pitfall right here. Trick of the trade is to avoid linking summary tasks. Why would I not want to link summary tasks? If I'm going to do stakeholder mapping, and it might take 4 days, and I need to get my requirements from all of the stakeholders, that might take a 1 week. And I need to validate some of those requirements. That might take another 5 days, or let's say 7 days. And I'm building the schedule. Well, it makes sense that it's all there. Problem is that I cannot start stakeholder mapping any sooner. There is no reason that I shouldn't be able to start sooner, but if I say, well, listen, I need to drag that bar and move it and start it sooner, it doesn't move. And the fact that I dragged it suddenly hard-coded a date there. Oops. Let's click on that start date. Press the delete key, get rid of it. Nothing in the summary task, nothing underneath it can start any sooner than the end of a 10-16 time period here. So I'm going to remove that link, and I encourage people that says, look, if you need a kickoff or a milestone that says kickoff requirements mapping, link that activity to an activity. The reason why is that if for some reason I can start doing this sooner, maybe I have minus 4 days of lag, I can allow dynamic schedule to start and stop sooner. And if you create dependencies between your summary tasks and tasks, or milestones to summary tasks, or summaries to summaries, chances are the bigger your schedule is, the more you're going to find that something won't move. And as you're trying to figure out what it is, it may be that you've linked a summary task and those tasks want to move, they just can't. So avoiding some of that is going to be very helpful in terms of you building a schedule to manage and maintain. Again, durations, great opportunity. Remember, duration comes in different formats, but duration is not work, right? If I insert a task or insert a column and I type in the work, and I say, hey, listen, it's a 1 day, it's a 1 hour duration, but I'm going to put 10 people on a 1 hour meeting. It's 10 hours worth of work. And so a lot of people confuse duration and work, and they try and make it both. This is really, I want people to begin thinking that says, hey, look, I'm scheduling it. Here's when it's going to get done. It's elapsed time. Maybe it's 2 days, but how many hours of work is very different. And so having a conversation with your technical resources or your development team is important. Saying, how long is this going to take time, elapsed time? How many hours of effort will that roll into? And so recognizing that these are two different questions, two different answers, and as we add resources to work and schedules, we should see a difference between the two. I think that will help make things work a lot easier. The other is very commonly as we get into our resource management is that sometimes things start and stop. And so I'm going to show you a couple shortcuts here around splitting tasks, and then I'm going to go ahead and step back for a moment and just kind of summarize some of our key points here. But have people say, you know, we had to put this on hold. Well, sometimes if a work activity gets put on hold, I encourage people to basically go in and insert a task and say, hey, on hold due to flooding, right? So we got flooded out. It's 2 weeks before our team can get back in there. Let's go ahead and link this, and it happened maybe 2 days into the middle of this other activity, so I'll make it a start to start, bump it up 2 days. There's no resources assigned to it, and then what I'm going to do is really create the dependency between, hey, our risk planning can conclude after we do and deal with our flooding. So it would be great if we did risk planning before flooding, but we didn't. Now, that's visualization, right? We visually can see that that activity happened. But if you don't like inserting extra rows and you really don't need to necessarily showcase that, let me undo this, hence 99 levels of undo. And what I might do is say, listen, in the middle of risk planning, we had to stop. I'm going to right-click on that bar, and I'm going to split the task. And so as you hover over this, you're going to find that very quickly you can see that I've got an opportunity here to pick the day where I stop, and I can drag it and drop it and start it. Now, just a little bit of a tip for you so people don't laugh at you and make fun of you, so I don't want this to happen to you, but it happens all the time, is that when people split their work, they'll do this. They'll right-click on it, and they'll click on split, and it gives you this nice little dialog box right here. Then what they do is they try and move their mouse pointer over to get that. So they'll right-click on it, hit split, and then they start chasing this bar all around going, hey, where'd it go? I'm trying to put it back. Oh, no, I can't click on it. Tim, I can't get it to split. I can't get that box to stop. It's a label, so just understand it's a label. The real work is really you moving it over the bar to find out what the day or hour you want to stop, and then you can grab the piece and relocate that. It doesn't set a constraint if you've already started that task. This is a great thing. It's not hard coding it. It's not putting a date in there. And then a lot of times what we'll do is we'll come in and we'll put a note. I just double-clicked on this and say work stopped due to key resource out on sick leave. Put a note in there. Tell the story, right? Tell the story with your project schedule. But notice rows 4 through 10 dynamically ebbed and flowed. I didn't have to go in hard code or move those dates around. And again, I can hover over it. There's a tool tip. We can see what it is. You've got some visualization. So in terms of building, I've kind of talked about some things about the interface, certainly talked about elements that are in the schedule that will help you build and manage. Let's step back for a moment. And let's talk about the options that we have in terms of our build, manage, success. So again, from our perspective, we really look for the opportunity for you to set up your durations, link your activities, create dependencies. And of course, marking a task done really should be looking at the percentage of time of where it's at today. I don't even look at percentage complete. So from a management perspective, you want that schedule to ebb and flow dynamically. Finally, things that we talked about that you won't find in a book, and I really want people to just hear this and kind of step back, and this might be a good validation for those of you that are using Project Now currently, is that when you step into Project and you're not afraid to rip the thing apart, break the pieces, reconnect them, you have arrived, really. The idea is don't fear the schedule. It's easy to take it apart. It's also easy to put it back together. And sometimes as you inherit schedules or components, if you have done a good job building this, it should be able to manage or at least tune directly. So you know a schedule is good when you've got 0 constraints or as few as possible. You can edit or manipulate that, and you can also switch back and forth between data views or graphical views in Project. Again, it's easy to break, it's easy to fix, right? You've got 99 levels of undo. Just make sure that you have not put your autosave on and you can run some of these scenarios. I find that the more comfortable people are in really running real-world scenarios in their project is one of the best functions of this product, is to give you that cost, that work forecasting, time-phased elements and deliverables. And again, it's a database. It's not a spreadsheet, so let it act like that. Use your filters, use your views. And again, a good schedule basically should be something that you can look and forecast, and it has actuals that have a look and a feel that says I can go in, I can click on it, I can progress that, or I can assign it. And so in terms of working there, you're going to pick up little tips and tricks, and hopefully today you've heard some things that maybe you haven't found or read, or for those of you that have worked a long time in project went, wow, that was a nice little approach to that. So our job at AdvisorCon is to really help optimize business in their transformation of using tools and technology in their day-to-day operation of project program and portfolio management. So Anna, let me kind of turn this back to you. Any final questions that maybe we can answer, and then we can kind of wrap up today?
Sure thing. I think we have time for just one, and that is there a good view for relationships to tasks?
Is there a good view for relationships and tasks? I heard just the last part of that. Let's talk about that real quickly. This is kind of a sexy thing here. Let me talk about it. And yes, I did use the word sexy, so let's look at this for a moment. One of the things that you're going to find as you begin managing schedules is the ability to view. And your View tab gives you the option to go in and kind of turn off the timeline and turn on the detail form down below. And this is called a dual pane view. And in some of what I talk about in some of our later webcasts or some of the instructor-led training or on-site work is that there's ways to manipulate this so that you have great, clear visualization. But let me show you an option that you may not be aware of. If I go into more views, and I come in and I'm looking at kind of what we call our relationship diagram. When I apply this, if I click on a task, you'll notice that I've got something that shows the relationships in a graphical view without necessarily even showing the Gantt chart. So you can see predecessors, successors directly. And again, this is called the relationship diagram. We find great ways to kind of pop these together. There's a lot of embedded little nuggets inside a project that you can work with. So excellent question. I think this is one of those things that people come up and say, wow, very helpful for me, especially when you have a complex schedule. And instead of just going into what we call the PERT chart, or some of you guys remember going into what we call the network or relationship diagrams here, is that this is good, but in terms of seeing my Gantt chart, I try and work in the grid. So in many cases, I'm only looking at the inputs and outputs directly to that task. And that's where we can go back in, add a split pane there for details, and if you want, you can turn on that relationship diagram for people to work with. So hopefully you can see this here. There we go. And I'll turn that on. All right, fantastic. Anna, let's kind of wrap up here, and I'll
Okay, and
give you the floor.
I'm going to let you see if we have time to sneak this last one in, or if not, we'll be following up with Robert after the fact. But here we go.
Okay.
What happens after you baseline a schedule?
Well, we didn't cover baselining, but I love the fact that an evolved schedule, the idea, remember, of simple earned value is, hey, what did we do compared to what we plan to do, right? The idea of baselining a schedule. And so the question is, what happens to a schedule when you baseline it? So if you go to the Project tab, and you go ahead and set the baseline, right? I click here and click on Set Baseline. The idea is that as I come into my environment with that baseline, it's going to copy the fields that you work with. So if I go and I bring in a kind of a baseline view here, let's just kind of give you an example of this. If I go into my variance view, you can see it takes the start, the finish. We talk about work and duration. Literally, it runs down here and it copies start, and it pastes it into the baseline start, and it copies finish and puts it in the baseline finish. And it does this not just for tasks, it does it for work, it does it for duration, it does it for start and finish. And so the idea is that you have even resources who are assigned to this get baseline. And so there's a lot of detail that will grow around a schedule around setting that baseline. So again, from the Project tab, you can come in here, set that baseline. You can also clear the baseline, and then you have the option to come in terms of formatting and say, hey, show me the baseline. Where's it at? I want to see what we were doing or what we were not doing. So again, let me take my basic schedule and let me pull this up for people and go, hey, I think I've got a good schedule. Here it is. Let's snap that baseline. So Project, set the baseline, and it looks like something is, here, let me just close these real quick. I have about 4 schedules open, and if I open it up real quick, let's just grab it. Here we go. So from a project perspective, let's set that baseline. Your dialog box, again, it's going to copy it. You can create interim plans. You can actually copy even baseline into start one or finish one and create historical pictures of these. It's helpful. But the idea is that in this case, you can see my graphical indicators. These schedule, work, and cost slip. If I looked at the formula behind these, I'm just saying, hey, listen, take the baseline or the scheduled finish and subtract the baseline finish, right? The idea is I want to know what the difference was between what I planned versus what I actually did. And in translation, it looks like this. If I bump it forward a few days, you'll notice that I have conditional formatting that says if it slips beyond a certain point in time, my original work versus what I planned has been snapped. Great question. Again, we could spend a lot more time into reporting and management, but here you go. Here's an option for your baseline being shown in the schedule. People can visually see where that is. Okay, Anna, back to you.
Fantastic. And with that, we will end our session as far as Tim's presentation. But Tim, thank you so much for spending this time with us. It's so helpful to get those tips and tricks. And thank you to all of
You
our
bet.
attendees. It's been a lot. We've covered a lot of ground in a short amount of time. And really, this is what we're hoping that you're wanting to do is reach out to us, email or phone call. As you see on your screen, we've identified a couple of ways that we think could be really helpful to continue this conversation. A demo and a free trial is some more in-depth time with Tim and his team working with yours so that you can actually see, touch, feel, work with, and start to understand these tools and the power behind them in a more in-depth and specific way to your environment. Also, we have our consultants that would love to go ahead and just have a conversation with you if you're finding that their expertise could be helpful where you're at in your projects. Also, cloud. We have a lot of cloud architect experts on staff who are evaluating and can help roadmap exactly what are the best tools for your environment. As we understand, there's still a lot of mystery around it that we're here to help you talk through. Okay, last comments. As a lot of you know, this session today did qualify for a free PDU. In order to claim that PDU, you're going to see a short survey appear as soon as you exit out of this session. Please take just a brief couple of seconds really to fill out those 5 short questions, as this weekly webinar series is constructed all for you. Your feedback is crucial to the continuation of this program and also the topics we cover. So if you could go ahead and do that, then that also is the last piece that enters you or qualifies you for this PDU. You're going to be getting an email from me on Friday with the PDU information. With that, I want to thank you all again and encourage you to reach out to us, as we'd love to keep talking with you. Have a great rest of the day.
Bye, everyone.